Hello, Kirsten. Hello, Lori. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Great. Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Keep Me Home Longer, the podcast that is optimistic about home care options so that as we age, we can, stay home longer. Today is the Parkinson's episode, as we advertised in the previous episode. And as always, one of the things we talk about is various conditions that need engagement with home care companies and management at home and how that works in a home care setting. So today we're going to be focused on Parkinson's. A very quick disclaimer: nothing in this podcast is meant to be medical advice. Listeners are urged to work closely with their medical specialists in the medical management of any conditions they have. Some very quick feedback to you both from the first episode, which was on CHF. I had a number of listeners comment that they loved the informal way that we were communicating and the tone that we set. So we're going to keep the same for today's podcast, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I also got some feedback, interestingly enough, about people that felt that we tapped into their sense of anxiety about getting older. So I know that we're doing a great public service here by having these conversations. So the other thing you guys need to know is that I've been doing a bit of research ahead of this podcast for Parkinson's. And in fact, I think my anxiety is now a little bit higher. I've been going to Google and searching and reading stuff. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I see Lori shaking her head. I'm looking forward to this conversation, Kirsten. I'm hoping that you can leave me in a slightly calmer position. So we'll see how we go there.
Sounds good.
Okay. And I know, Lori, you are often warning me about not doing, not going to Dr. Google, as you call it.
Yes, Dr. Google. I much prefer working with medical professionals.
I agree.
Yeah. I know. Okay. So, Kirsten, I think I'm going to put the first question to you. So, if you could tell me, please, what is Parkinson's and how does it present itself for people in families that might be listening to this episode and dealing with patients undergoing Parkinson's in the home setting? I have an uncle and relatives that have this, and I think it'll be useful for them to hear just a very quick definition of how you in that home care setting see Parkinson's.
Yeah, of course. So Parkinson's is neurodegenerative, meaning the problems in the brain, and it's progressive. It gets worse over time. I think probably a very simple, concise explanation of what Parkinson's is. People who have Parkinson's don't have enough of a chemical or a neurotransmitter because the area of the brain responsible for making it has stopped working. So that's kind of a concise, what is it? How does it present? There are some classic symptoms that we associate with Parkinson's, but its symptoms and how it sort of progresses can vary widely from person to person. I once heard a neurologist say, if you've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's. But I will talk about the classic symptoms that are seen. So generally, we think of resting tremor. That's one of the first things that you'll see. Rigidity of muscles and freezing and balance issues. So freezing, people literally cannot take steps forward at times. They say that they literally feel like their feet are stuck to the ground. So as you can imagine, this presents a lot of safety issues. And you're probably wondering, I said dopamine. What does dopamine have to do with Parkinson's and movement? You're kind of familiar with, a lot of people are familiar with dopamine and its relationship with motivation and focus, and it's sort of the reward chemical.
As far as I know, Kirsten, I love dopamine. I think I love dopamine.
Exactly. We all want that dopamine hit, right? Well, dopamine also has a really important relationship with muscle movement. So hence you see the symptoms that I talked about.
I had no idea. I didn't realize that. That's information today. That's a good learning. Kirsten, how do you come to be so informed about Parkinson's? This is more information I got from you just now than I was able to collate from all the searching that I was doing online. So,
Well, I actually came from the hospital environment. I worked at a teaching hospital, and was my focus really was neurology, neurosurgery. So I worked in the hospital on clinical trials, specifically some with Parkinson's, and then was able to see patients in the home environment, kind of seeing those clinical trials through to fruition. So it was really a great experience and gave me a lot of insight and knowledge spending time with families and the people with Parkinson's.
you said something very interesting. You said if you've seen one patient, you've seen one patient. That sounds, I think I know what that means, but that probably needs some explanation.
Well, what it means is people who are experiencing Parkinson's are not all going to experience the same symptoms. Some are going to progress more rapidly. Some are going to have maybe no tremors, maybe no rigidity. Some will have tremors and rigidity. Some will really experience a lot of what we call the silent symptoms. Uh, Anxiety, apathy, depression, constipation, swallowing issues not so silent, but yet another symptom that is kind of this varying display of different symptoms.
Huh. You said that in your experience in those clinical trials that you spent time with patients and families. That's exactly what I'm curious about. If I'm a patient and I'm listening to this, or my family is listening to this, if I am a person with Parkinson's, what 3 or 4 things from that experience would you say would be of interest to me and my family, given that my ask is the theme of this podcast is keep me home longer?
So, good question. I would say a few things that come to mind are number one, safety. We're always concerned about safety. So, as we talked about the decreased dopamine and problems with balance, freezing, etc., we want to make sure that you're not going to fall. So, safety is one of the major things, and also autonomy. We want you to be able to stay as independent for as long as possible. So, with these considerations, I want to say, Biju, we're going to make sure, if this is you, that you've got a really good team behind you. And that would include a neurologist, speech language pathologist. And I was going to say neurologist, maybe movement disorder specialist, physical therapist, and very knowledgeable caregivers helping to take care of you. So safety and autonomy are the things that I want people to think about. I want you to be prepared. So we're going to talk about specific adaptive equipment that's going to help you. There are so many things on the market today, so many things out there that can really help someone with Parkinson's lead a much more independent life, and a safe life than there used to be. So you're in a good place. It's a good time.
Okay, I'm going to ask you in a second about more of those in terms of what is coming, because that's where I think that sense of optimism that I'm looking for and craving is built on. What's getting better and where this is going. But just to turn quickly to Lori for a moment. Lori, you told me that you are set up as an organization to support various complex care conditions in the home. Listening to Kirsten, given how knowledgeable she is, there's not too many organizations that have access to people who have worked in clinical trials for Parkinson's, right? But by the same token, like I said last time, she can't be everywhere. And although the only person I want to work with is Kirsten, as does everyone else listening to this podcast, what can I expect from you at an organizational level to support this? Because I don't want to get to a situation where it's just Kirsten and, when she decides she's tired of dealing with me, then that's it.
Throw you back over to Lori.
Right.
Sounds like she may have worked with you for a while.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
No, seriously, that's a great question. It really is a team-based approach. So Kirsten is not the only registered nurse on board. I think if you look at the package as a whole, having that skilled nursing oversight is huge in these types of cases. Whether the person has Kirsten's level of in-depth knowledge or not, nurses have the training necessary to be able to guide, to be able to understand, to be able to educate. And that leads into the next one, which is the education of our care staff. It's really important for care staff to have the education necessary on a couple of levels. One, recognition of symptoms, recognition of changes in condition, and having the training necessary where they understand what is the condition, what are the things we should be watching for, when do I need to report back to the clinical team that there is a significant change in condition. The second part is what Kirsten mentioned earlier, which is safety, and providing the training necessary for preventing falls. What do we look for? Kirsten goes in and does a complete home safety assessment before we start any case, and we're going to make recommendations about pulling up those fluffy rugs, and maybe there's a glass coffee table with sharp edges, and that's a true case. That's something that we had. We recommended that be taken up because it was definitely a danger. So we're going to do all of that. But even after we do that, 2 weeks later, the client may put that fluffy big rug back down. Sure. We want our staff trained to recognize what are the risks. In terms of mobility, they need to understand how to use a gait belt. They get all the training necessary to make sure that we are standing by with the client and keeping them safe. The last thing we want is a fall. Recognition of things such as caregivers can't administer medications, but they can remind. Are they reminding the staff member or the client to take that medication on time? And Kirsten may touch on this. One of the medications cannot be given with any protein. So the client may need a reminder that they need to take that outside of a meal. Do not take it at a mealtime because it will interfere with the absorption of the medication. So these are all of the things that we spend a lot of time training, and we actually bring our staff in to a fully equipped training room because with a lot of the work that we do, simply seeing a video does not really give them the skill set necessary. They need to work hands-on with someone where they can ask questions and we can actually competency them and say, yes, I'm signing off. They know how to do that transfer. They know how to do these 10 different things.
Fair enough. Last time we talked, you guys introduced me and we discussed, it didn't introduce me so much as I'm familiar with it, but we discussed for the listeners something called the Hoyer lift. And now you've referred to something called a gait belt. Kirsten, you want to cast a little bit of light on what a gait belt is and how it works?
Oh, sure. Yeah, gait belts are wonderful. So a gait belt is literally a belt. It's kind of a canvas belt, or you could go on Amazon. There are so many different kinds of gait belts. But it literally just provides some support. So if the person with Parkinson's is walking and they get a little unsteady, the caregiver has that belt to hold on to make sure that they're not going to sway, too far to one side or the other, lose their balance and have a fall. Wonderful safety piece of equipment.
Okay. It's interesting that as we talk, I realize that technology is also trying to keep up. And I think at some stage in the future, we should do not just mechanical device, but also technology deep dive. And maybe this is a good point at which to ask you that question that I sort of put on hold, Kirsten. What do you see in terms of development and good things happening that are of an optimistic and hopeful nature in terms of, you talked about assistive things, if I recall correctly?
Oh, yeah. So there's one item that I love. It is, most people with Parkinson's will use a walker at some point. But I kind of talked about the problem with the freezing where they feel like their feet are stuck to the ground. So This walker has a laser that is cast onto the floor and helps the person with Parkinson's. If they can see kind of a cue of where to put that foot, they can walk. And there's also a sound that plays in sort of a cadence and gives them a rhythm in which to step to. So they see the laser, they know where to put their foot, and they've got that sound with the cadence. They've got a rhythm to move. It's like magic for somebody with Parkinson's. Yeah, really exciting.
And this is freely available?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So this is not some future tech that's being developed. This is now.
No, there are all kinds of little tips and tricks that we go over with our caregivers to help people with Parkinson's, and we educate the families as well.
Anything else?
Well, I think before I learned of the sound cadence, I used to sing. I won't put you through that right now. But
oh, come on. You can sing. What you can sing. What's your favorite song? You can sing it.
Row, row, row your boat, we'll say,
Okay.
Just kind of having that rhythm gives somebody. So, I would demonstrate and nobody liked it, but, the families would take that over and it worked really well for getting people through doorways. People tend to freeze during, when they're walking through doorways. So the laser on the ground and the rhythm, whether they want to do a song or they want to march in place to get them going. There are a lot of little tips like this.
Lori, do you see anything in your communication with the community and areas where you think there are similar sort of interesting developments you want to talk about?
Well, I think, one of the great things right now is the wide variety of adaptive equipment. There really isn't a reason why a person can't continue to lead a relatively independent life and continue living a very normal life. Something as simple as eating does become challenging, but if you take that one little thing, there are all sorts of adaptive devices. There are these little foam roller type things that you put on the handle of a fork because it becomes more difficult to hold that fork. There are little guards that go on the edge of the plate because it's not as easy as it progresses to just simply scoop the food off your plate when you're eating. And I think one of the things that we try to do is have some of the equipment here so we can be demonstrating to our caregivers, because we do want them being proactive and mentioning to clients, hey, something as simple as this alternative type of fork could mean that the person can continue to feed themselves and be very comfortable. So we do try to provide that kind of education to staff as well so that they can be very proactive with the families.
Okay. Interesting. Kirsten, how do you see the future from a nursing perspective? I know you're talking all the time with neurologists and the medical community. Anything exciting happening out there that I can take to bed tonight and feel comfortable in my mind that there is some exciting stuff out there, if anything?
I think the future is bright for Parkinson's. First of all, medications. First line of defense is medications. Carbidopa, levodopa, something that is usually kind of the first line medication, can really be very effective, especially in the beginning. It's wonderful. But if you're thinking about future technologies, they're doing a lot with deep brain stimulation. That's where they put the electrodes in the brain in the area where the tremors are starting. And then there's kind of a controller that is implanted right around the collarbone. And then electrical stimulation is applied to those electrodes in those areas where the tremors are originating. And it can really significantly slow down the tremors.
Wow.
Deep brain stimulation, focused ultrasound. So obviously with DBS, deep brain stimulation, it's an invasive procedure, right? You're doing brain surgery. But something new that's interesting to look into is focused ultrasound. It's a minimally invasive procedure, but it's showing a lot of promise. So that's something that Biju, you can go to a reputable site and Google
and do some further research. Okay, I'll be doing that. And again, just as a reminder, I know you referred to a medication that was just based on knowledge. You're keen to make sure that this is not in any way any form of medical advice. So
Must
people should be dealing with their doctors.
Must be medically prescribed, of course.
Yes.
What is the primary medical advice specialist in the case of Parkinson's?
It would be a neurologist, and often a neurologist who specializes in movement disorders.
Of course. Yeah.
You asked about other things in the community. There's
Yeah.
also a lot of other options. As an example, there is a boxing program, and we have someone right here in Huntington Beach, HB Fight Club, that has it. And it's not about boxing as boxing. It's about the rhythmic motions that they follow. And it is wonderful. I was actually introduced to it at a Parkinson's walk. I was talking to someone, and she motioned to her husband, who was part of the group, and they were starting the demonstration of what they do. And she told me that a year earlier, he was wheelchair bound and could no longer walk. And he was now up doing this routine. And it was just magic to see. Now, like she said, he was still a heavy fall risk. He needed a walker, but he was back out of the wheelchair and using a walker.
Interesting.
There's another group that I absolutely love. It's called Tremble Clef. And it's
Tremble Clef. That's tremble as in TREMBLE because of the symptom, and then clef as in CLEF.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that one is all about using music as therapy. And it's a licensed therapist that runs it. It's a choir. They offer both a virtual and an in-person. And it is phenomenal what it does, because singing really helps to strengthen. And often people can continue to swallow longer and keep their vocal cords strong from doing this. So when you think about all the options out there, there really is a lot to help you continue leading a good quality of life
at home. Yeah,
yes,
that's really good to know. And again, I know that you're not endorsing any of those.
No, I'm just trying to use these strictly as examples.
Right.
Out on the East Coast, there now is a special group of gyms that have opened. They've actually found that ping pong is tremendous exercise for anyone with Parkinson's. Again, it's that rhythmic motion.
Yeah,
and they now have some, I don't remember the name of the chain, but they're opening up gyms specifically for people with Parkinson's to come in and do the routines with them.
To both of you, there is a need for a sense of community. And, as I've done more work here in your company, I've heard references to support groups. I know you guys run support groups. Would both of you like to just tell me a little bit about that? Kirsten, from your perspective, how do those support groups help? And Lori, from your perspective, what sort of support groups you're running at the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Support groups are tremendously important, not only for the person with Parkinson's, but for the family as well. Experts are brought in to discuss new techniques, just give basic information or new information on what's going on in the world of Parkinson's. But also it's that socialization. So we kind of talked about one of the silent symptoms is depression, anxiety, apathy. Getting someone with Parkinson's involved in a support group can be tremendously effective in helping with some of those symptoms.
Makes sense. And Lori, you've got some support groups running. How are those functioning, and how do you find people reacting to those?
So we have a couple running, and they've been excellent. What we try to do, again, we try to bring in experts, new technology. We had someone from a deep brain stimulation manufacturer come in and talk to the group. We've had a couple of different neurologists and movement disorder specialists come in. We brought in Tremble Clefs. We brought in HB Fight Clubs. We've had a really broad variety of speakers come in, and it's just a great opportunity to connect and figure, because not everyone is going to do the same thing. Singing might not work for some, it might work for others. So we really just tried to focus on variety and provide a variety of speakers where they are spreading good quality advice for anyone suffering with Parkinson's.
Tremendous. As always, my aim is to come into this, get some thoughts resolved, and leave with a slightly more optimistic view, which is what I think you guys have done today. There's a lot of specialization out there. Thank you both very much. I appreciate the time. I'm going to wrap up here because we're almost at the 30-minute mark, and I know that listeners will want to, at some stage, stop hearing my voice, although I suspect they'll want to keep hearing both yours. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you guys very much, and I'll talk to you in episode 3 of this podcast.
All right.
All right.